Hi everyone, and welcome back to Constant Writers, the podcast where I talk to indie horror authors about them, their work, and their relationship with Stephen King. My name's Dave Musson. I'm at Dave Musson on Instagram. I'm your host for this podcast, and I'm incredibly excited in this episode to bring you another of my favourite authors, possibly my favourite new author discovery, at least new to me, of 2022, and that is the wonderful Rowan Hill. She writes stories that just seem to get under my skin, and I cannot recommend her work highly enough. In this chat, we're going to talk a bit about how she got into reading, how she got into writing, her relationship with Stephen King, and it's an interesting one because she's far from, by her own admission, far from the biggest King fan, but is very, very aware of how much King influences her as a horror writer and the genre as a whole. So it's a bit of a different chat to what we've had previously, but very interesting all the same. And then we get on to Rowan's King book of choice, which is the fantastic Firestarter from 1980. So we hear a bit more about why Rowan likes that one. So do check the links in the description to find links to Rowan's work. You'll also find links to some of my things you can support. So sign up to my newsletter or pick up a copy of the Ultimate Stephen King quiz book. And I'll see you back at the end just to round this off and say bye. But for now, here's the fantastic Rowan Hill. So Rowan, welcome to Constant Writers. How are you doing?
Like I said before, I'm very nervous. This feels like a test. I know it's not, but yeah, let's get into King.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely not a test. I know you know that yourself, but yeah, we are gonna get to King, but we'll start by talking about you, and hopefully that will help the nerves float away a little bit. And to be honest, I'm probably more keen to hear about you and your story anyway. Like the King stuff is interesting, and obviously the people watching and listening to this want to know the King stuff, but I think there's a lot to go through with you. So I'm going to start with a question I'm asking everyone on this series. Like, I'm interested in your origin story as a writer and a reader, I guess. Like, what was your motivation to get into doing all of this stuff?
My villain origin story. One. I would probably say that my starting out was just my dad. Like, I grew up in the era where people were starting to get VCRs in their home, right? And so suddenly you could watch movies whenever you wanted. My dad was just like a big horror fan, just left me alone all the time. Very, very, like, should have called Child Protective Services, honestly. And that's how I kind of was introduced into horror. I think my first memory is Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I was left in that room with that movie. And in terms of books, I was the very traditional R.L. Stein kid. I didn't move into the Fear Street when I became a teenager. I went into fantasy because that's what my dad had on the bookshelf, and I was a Lord of the Rings kind of person. I will always remember the first scary thing I read that was like meant for adults was Frodo in the Barrow Wight, and that like creeping hand searching for him. So I kind of grew up in fantasy and then just did my own thing for like 10 or 15 years until I was in a place between countries and jobs, and I got an idea. It was like 2015, and it was the refugee crisis was happening in Syria, and I got a pretty I had this like shot to the head about like, well, we're treating these refugees terribly. Like, what if we treated aliens like this? And I think District 9 was about to come out then. And yeah, I kind of got this story in my head, and I made it up all in one night, and then I started to write it after in and out over 2 years, and then I think in 2018 I got serious with writing. So that's like my journey to horror and writing is it's all over the place, but I found out I liked writing horror a lot more than any other genre.
I mean, you mentioned being all over the place, and like I was reading, I think I've got these the right way around. You're California born and Australian raised, is that right?
You pulled that off my website, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So I mean, like,
yeah,
you know, yeah, so that's a lot of moving around, a lot of
That
traveling,
is
but
a very
some very distinct places as well. Like, do they infiltrate your work at all? Like those two settings?
yeah, look, that like one sentence is a very condensed way. That's like, it's very frustrating when people ask me, where you're from. And I recently just moved to America, and it's the first time I've actually lived in America as an adult. All right, so the question was, how is it infiltrated? So I have lived pretty much over the world, and that is due to I feel like that is the thing about Australians, is Australians move around quite a lot, especially to other like, I'm sure you know several Australians living in Britain, right?
Yeah,
We're like,
I'm into rugby league, so I encounter a lot of Australians over here.
yeah. And to answer your question, yes, all the time. It infiltrates my work all the time. It's quite a useful tool
Hmm.
when you are trying to think like what can set your story apart. Is like you put it in a different location, and I have been to many locations, to live, and also just I was a big traveler when I was younger, and that is very helpful. Like I I don't think I've set any two stories in the same location.
And that brings me nicely to how I first came across your work, actually. So the first thing I read of yours was They Eat People You Know, in the Slice of Paradise anthology from the start of 2022, which was my favourite of that entire collection. If memory serves me correctly, that was American characters in Australia.
Yeah, that's really nice of you to say. Thank you.
Well,
I love those big stories.
yeah, it was one I really did enjoy reading, and I was just catching up on what you'd done this year in preparation for our chat, and it feels like that's almost sparked a bit of a purple patch for you this year in terms of you getting stories out there, and but certainly your shorter work has been hitting a lot of publications this year. Like, is that like just is that just everything coming together at once? Is that a lot of hard strategic planning going into this, and it all paying off? Like, how's that year
Planning.
worked out for you?
It's very strange you say that. I feel 2022 has been my least successful year.
Okay.
And I've heard several other authors say that. No, there is no planning. There is no there is no grand master plan when it comes to short stories. It is just whatever you have and whatever anyone accepts. Yeah, I have several longer. The thing with short stories is that they move fast. Like, you see a call and you maybe have, at most, you have like a month to get it in,
Yeah.
and then publication will be longer. Or like, not shortly after. It'll be like 2 or 3 months until it gets published. But with long, I have 2 or 3 long pieces that I'm trying to sell right now, and that's just a longer game. It takes a lot longer to sell those. So, like you say that I've been blooming this year, but not really.
Yeah, so I know. I mean, I've been having a stab at sort of the short story anthology game this year, and yeah, I get what you mean. I guess a lot of what we're seeing as a viewing public this year is probably acceptances you've had maybe months even from last year and that. So I was curious, like, your approach to the anthology call. Like, are you keeping an eye out for calls as a point of inspiration, or do you just like see calls and go, oh, I've got something in my locker that I could send to that, or is it a mixture of both?
Well, I mean, last year I would have said the first, where I saw a call and got inspiration for it, and I would have written for that call. And I discovered that that is such a good way to get burned out. It's a good way to get burned out. It's a good way to get upset. And it's especially like if it's a very specialized call, it is a good way to like have a trunk story that may never see the light of day, because who would, like, when is there going to be a call like that? I've sold quite a few stories, but for every one story I sold, there was 2 that are still in my trunk.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I did that approach at first. And because I was much more useful like a year, 2 years ago, and I had a lot more. I feel like I was creatively full in my bank. I
Mm.
did it, and but this year I feel like I've grown as a writer and became better. I don't know if that's true. I feel it is.
Mhm.
But so now I've learned that unless I see a call and I immediately get like that burst of energy and excitement to write it, I'm not jumping for every call. It's too exhausting. You put too much pressure on yourself. So now I just write short stories that I am passionate about and I take my time with them. And I I will usually have a publication in mind
Yeah.
for a short story, but I won't I'll spread it out.
And you've mentioned your longer works, and off the back of the short story of yours I read in the Slice of Paradise collection, I did go and check out In the Arctic Sun, which I really enjoyed that one as well. I thought particularly that sort of that slow burn start you have, the atmosphere there was just, I don't know, there's something really oppressive about it and really dark that I really enjoyed, and then it just like explodes into that wild ending. Like what sort of reaction have you
Gonna
had?
spoil it.
No, I won't. What's the reaction been to that one?
Oh, like public reaction?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, it wasn't, it was a small press who put it out, and I don't think they did any, uh, wider marketing for it.
Mhm.
Which, is disappointing, but when you can't really expect them to go guns blazing. I got great reviews for it, and that's what I'm happy with. My friends told me that they liked it. Yeah, I think most of my family read it. I don't know.
Well, not just great reviews. I mean, it's onto the Bram Stoker Awards winning list. Like,
Yeah,
I was curious, like, what does that actually mean?
yes, yes. So the Bram Stoker Awards have several stages.
Mhm.
So the reading list is just for FAR Authors Association. Like another member said, "Hey, I really like this book." And so she or he submitted it to the reading list. And that's just basically a very long list of books that other horror authors think you should read in going forward with submitting Bram Stoker's. The next stage is coming up in a few weeks, and it's when, if enough people have recommended your work, then you will make the preliminary ballot.
Okay.
And that is when you will have like a little feather in your cap. So it's very nice when somebody recommends your work, but a it's not anything big
Mhm.
yet. I hope.
I'm curious to know like how you're finding sort of navigating the world of I guess indie publishing in general, because I think from what you've said so far it feels like a mixture of like lots of fun stuff but actually quite a lot of exhausting and quite draining points as well.
It can be exhausting. I guess it depends on what you're in it for. If you're in indie publishing to go to the next stage, then that is just more pressure on yourself, and it can be quite stressful and disheartening sometimes. It's definitely, I would probably say the best thing indie publishing has given me is camaraderie with other writers, and I've met some wonderful people. But, if you go into it with just, I like to write, I want to get my work out there, then it is wonderful. I mean, it's definitely still challenging. And I would say that a lot of it is based off of, so for instance, I wrote a piece, very short piece, 1,000 words. I thought it was really great. I thought of a perfect publication where it was that same kind of quirky, and that editor just didn't, I wasn't for that editor. And then same time, send it off to another one, And this person, editor, is like, I love this story. This is exactly, it resonated with me. I was in this particular situation as well. And this one editor kept it for like 10 months before publishing it. That's how much she liked it. So I think it's just a matter of finding the editor for the story. It's like a matching game. You got to try all around before you find somebody who likes your story and picks it up.
Yeah, and I guess it takes a while to sort of do that networking really and start to understand what the landscape looks like. Because I know from my point of view, I've put out a few things this year that, like you were saying earlier, I saw a call and it gave me that spark of energy and wrote something that I was really pleased with. And then every time it's been like, nope, not for us. And then you're like, okay, well, I still feel something about this. So you try and put it out to other ones. And again, I've sort of been doing my homage to Stephen King and his wall spike of rejections. I've got a pinned Twitter thread of all of my everything going on this year. And yeah, like there's been 2 acceptances for like 40 rejections or something. But I don't know, I find it gives me
writing.
Yeah.
It's not writing, it's not your stories, it's just the person, like the editor for the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can see some of the other people I've spoken to have been like, you know, they sort of had a go at the submitting approach and almost find it too disheartening. So just like really knuckle down and like totally take control of it themselves and just do their own thing. And I guess it's a strange one, isn't it? It's like, you know, how important is that validation from somebody else of your work?
Very important to me. Yes, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. Do you want someone else to say, hey, yeah, this is worth something? And my answer is yes. I like have some sort of childhood trauma that makes me say, yeah, I need somebody to like this and like put money on the table for it.
Yeah. No, and I think, and it's good to know your worth, and it's good to, I think there's nothing wrong with that approach at all. So in light of all that, then, in terms of like how you're finding everything and what you've got going on, like what are you working on at the moment? What you got in store for 2023 as we go through it?
Much. No, let's see. So I'm currently on my 3rd edit of my longer Southern Gothic novel. And I think it's worth something. I've had a few agents ask for full requests, but I've heard so far that it's the premise is great, just didn't connect with my writing. So I'm like, well, how can I make my writing more compelling? But I've stepped away from it for like a month just to kind of get my brain back. And I'm a few short stories, but I don't have anything. So I think this is why I felt not very successful in 2022 because half of the first half of the year was writing this story, and it took me 1 year to like plan, write it, edit, and so then the next half, like a third so far, has been trying to sell it to try to get agents interested, and like just no fish are biting right now. I've had a lot of tugs on my line, but yeah, I mean, nothing for 2023. That sounds really sad when I say it out loud. I'm sure something will come up. Something needs to come up.
And by the time this comes out, there you might be in a whole new tidal wave of creativity, and just like you just never know when it's going to hit, do you? I mean, for peek behind the curtain, we are recording this sort of mid-November, so I think we're approaching that point of the year where everyone is slumping and slowing down and stuff. I think it's quite
tired, man.
Yeah.
I moved this year. I moved from Italy to America. I wrote I've done a lot. So right now, to answer your question, I'm just trying to sell my work right now. Fingers crossed. That's all you do.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll come good. Well, let's switch on to the other part of this interview then. So, as you know, this channel is a Stephen King channel, and we were chatting before we pushed record, and you mentioned when we started that you feel a little nervous about this, and you were almost saying that you're perhaps slightly daunted by my sort of Annie Wilkesness compared to where you're coming in when it comes to Stephen King. But I'm really curious that you are a horror writer, and as I said to you before we started, like he is the elephant in the room for any horror writer, whether you're a super fan or not. So for you, what does Stephen King mean to you, and what sort of place does he hold in your heart?
Yeah, look, you said like I read this question and I was like, well, I wouldn't like introduce myself as a Stephen King fan.
Mm.
But then I was thinking, but I'm like, oh bloody hell, the guy kind of permeates like horror culture. He's like, I mean, he's kind of like the Godfather. Absolutely a Godfather of horror. And so even if you do not consciously recognize his influence, he's definitely like got something like a finger in your pie somewhere. And so I would say probably my introduction to Stephen King was Firestarter, the movie. That's because, like as we said before, VCRs are coming, into homes when I was growing up. And of course, I wanted to watch the kid from E.T.
Mm.
Um, and so I mean, I say it unfortunately as an author that I was not introduced to Stephen King by his writing, but his medium of movies.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's bad. I mean, it definitely is shocking when you are like going like I've seen so many movies and then I don't find out till after that, oh, that was a Stephen King book, and that was that was when I was younger. And certainly it's taking place a lot more like his short horror stories are like so many, so many. But they don't always get introduced. Stephen King's Children of the Corn or Stephen King's Mr. Harrigan's Bone.
Mm.
So I would say that is how I was introduced. And so he's kind of like, he was the guy who wrote all the scary movies when I was a
Yeah.
kid.
See, and you mentioned there that like, you'd sort of say that pretty much any horror writer that there is going to be a tinge of King influence somewhere on that person's writing. Like thinking of your own writing, can you see any impact that King has had on what you do?
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about this too. I had like several different layered responses for this one. I would say, oh no, I don't think about King like, no, he doesn't come into my writing at all. And I'm like, oh well, then there was that time when I was looking for beautiful, like well constructed sentences, and the first line of it is such a beautiful sentence. Maybe the second half of the sentence more than the first one. And if you can't recall, do you recall?
Yes, the line about the
Paper boat going down if it rains, swollen with rain. Yeah. I can't do it verbatim either, but it is such a beautifully crafted sentence, like with the rolling vowels and soft L's. It's a wonderful sentence. And sometimes I'm like, damn it, yeah, he's a very good writer. I looked him up for that. And then I realized that his female villain protagonist, I do a lot of very female centered horror, and where we make the females, we do, I like to toss the gender norms out, and a lot of my villains are the women.
Yeah.
And I realized that heck, that's he made female villains, like, and he does a really great job of creating these characters who on any other like day you would say, oh, she should definitely be locked up. Like, this girl has telekinesis and she killed like her entire class. Like, no, like throw away the key. But he makes them the victims, so you root for them. Like, first page of Carrie, you're like, oh, this poor girl. Oh wait, she ends up killing everything. Like,
Yeah.
so, and it's the same for a lot of his female protagonists, or maybe even antagonists. I'm not sure like how you look at it. And then then I can't really ignore this because it might come out in like 10 years. Is I actually like based an entire novel around a Stephen King like the person Stephen King.
Right.
Actually, yeah. Actually, I can't really ignore that one. Is that I
Yeah.
actually centered an entire 110,000 word Southern Gothic around a horror author. It's very much
Okay.
like Stephen King. So
I,
yes,
I was
yeah.
I was also going to throw in. I got big Gerald's Game vibes at the start of In the Arctic Sun. Just again that sort of that isolation, that slow burn, that looming threat of something. That was probably more because I just am looking out for little nods like that in anything I read, but it definitely seeped through for me. So yeah, there you go. Well, in terms of the King stuff, then I've asked all of the guests on this series to pick one King release in particular to talk about in a little bit more detail, and you've gone for Firestarter, which you already mentioned, and we'll get to that next question. But I know you had a couple of others that you were willing to throw into the ring as well. I think Carrie and Christine were the ones, if I remember correctly. So like,
Yes. So wait, okay, I have rethought this question because
okay,
there's another one which I don't think gets any acknowledgement because Stephen King did not, it was not adapted from a Stephen King. But have you ever watched the movie Skinwalkers?
Sleepwalkers. Sorry, do you mean?
Sleepwalkers, yes.
Oh yeah,
Yes, so that was Stephen King's first screenplay, right? And I've never, like, it is such a gem. Like, Mark Hamill cameo, like,
with the mustache. Yeah, very good.
yes,
I was
I can't remember.
I was actually guest on Psychotronica podcast a while ago, specifically talking about Sleepwalkers. Yeah, I have a lot of time for that movie.
There is just, it's like a treasure trove. It has everything for like young, horny teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
It has, and I think the thing I've been trying to formulate my thoughts quite a lot for this. The thing I think I really appreciate about Stephen King is how he creates his own monsters. So Sleepwalkers has, I'm sorry, I put down my pencil.
It's fine.
Sleepwalkers has, very vampire-like villains, like they're monsters, but they're not quite vampires, right?
Yeah, they're also like a sort of weird werecat whose enemy is cats. Which
Yeah, you're right.
just a strange mix, isn't it?
So he does a good job of like taking parts of monsters and making them into something new. And I just, yeah, like you asked me like what other books did you? I'm like, yeah, you could talk about books or we could talk about like this thing that was so abnormal from his usual repertoire that we should talk about that.
Yeah, no, I like it. So in terms of Firestarter, then
Okay.
King's well, that was like his first stab at sci-fi horror from 1980, and it's obviously the story of Charlie McGee and her dad Andy on the run from the shop. I mean, you mentioned you sort of were at first exposed to it via the movie, but in terms of the book, like what made you pick Firestarter for this?
Yeah. I think because I mean, all right, so why did it resonate with me? Well, I mean, obviously I was like when I was introduced to it, I was a young girl. And this was kind of like an answer to like X-Men, kind of, I guess. This kid who has powers that she doesn't really want, that she can't really control, and she's being hunted. So that's kind of how like it grouped in my mind. I'm always surprised whenever I pick the book back up by how long it is because there's just pieces that I forget because it goes into a lot of detail about the shop and the agents that work on there. First of all, Andy McGee is like the ultimate great like American, like he's a great dad, he's a great friend, he's a great husband. He like he does these terrible things against his will because he has, he's the beggar who's needs bread. He's
Hmm.
the dad that has these powers who needs to escape. So he's a wonderfully written character that can't really do any wrong. I guess maybe that's his one fault, is that he's never really bad until the end, where he, pushes Charlie or to do that. Um, Charlie is the best character. Is I mean, who do you think? This is going to be subjective, but who do you think the best character in this novel is?
I mean, yeah, I mean, best or favorite? I mean, my favorite is probably Rainbird,
Yes. Right.
but
Absolutely.
but Charlie is fantastic. But I mean, for me, some of the the tiny characters, I think probably because of the scenes they have are almost as memorable for me. So like the oh, what's his name? Is it Pincho? The guy who cross dresses and feeds his hand into the garbage dispenser. Like that scene is just ingrained in my head through its gnarliness. But yeah, I think to answer your question, I think Rainbird it would be the one I would leap to immediately.
Yeah, I agree. And there's nothing wrong with saying Charlie McGee, but she doesn't quite, not until like when she's in the shop and she realizes that Rainbird betrayed her, does she really get any agency for herself? Like she's like the pawn, which is what they wanted for her. But I certainly enjoyed her more when she like let go.
Whereas Rainbird, there's like that his obsession with wanting to see people's lights go out. That
Mhm.
that has always struck me, and I reread it earlier in 2022 in sort of preparation for the remake movie coming out, and I'd forgotten little details like his collection of shoes and stuff like that. He's just there's just so much to him that's unnerving and ruthless. I think he's a very terrifying proposition, I think. In terms of like memorable scenes then, because I think there's a lot. For me, I find Firestarter to be like lots of great scenes with like perhaps the bits in between that sometimes lose me a little bit, but where it's good, it's like shit pun intended, but it's smoking hot. It is really good. Are there any scenes that really jump out to you as being favorites?
This book does a lot of, like you said, it does lots of little, like, just brief asides, like the guy in the airport whose shoes just suddenly start on fire because they need a getaway. There's so many of those that sometimes it was a little bit distracting. Especially when it jumped between the agent, who was trying to get away. But I love the scenes with Irv and
Mhm.
his wife, were really nice and cozy in some places. I mean, until they get shot.
Yeah,
No, that the grandparents, like, the substitute grandparents on the farmstead. That's very nice. It's like a coziness in the middle of a firestorm. I enjoy those. I enjoy, mixing the genres, like in between a book, having a nice little getaway.
yeah, having a bit
Yeah, the
a bit
shop
of a
when,
human interlude. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, and then until you kill them. It's
yeah,
nice.
yeah. I'm curious to hear what you think happened to Charlie next at the end. So,
Yeah.
spoiler alert for a book that's nearly 50 years old. But obviously, she goes off to tell her story.
I one of the reasons why I like this book, the first time I read it, I think I was like 22, 23, and I read that end page is like offices of Rolling Stone. I'm like, oh shit, that's still like a good choice. Like even today, like you're like that is smart. Like I picked up the pencil again. That is I can't, I don't know whether that is some kind of augury of Stephen King, like could spot that this publication had a longevity to it and it would still be a very good publication for nonpartisan, kind of reporting. What did Charlie do afterwards? You know, I remember the passage where the agents aren't worried about Charlie talking because they have a 90%. There's a 90% chance that Charlie's going to commit suicide, so they won't have to worry her talking. I was like, yeah, that's gotta be it. Yeah,
Because King
better.
himself said he sometimes imagined Charlie ending up meeting Danny Torrance when they're both a bit older and them getting married and moving to Salem's Lot. I mean, I think he was sort of running with that as the idea came into his head whenever he got asked that question. But she's one of those characters that I feel like he could bring back and do something really interesting with. But I don't know. But I don't know whether
Their sleep redo, huh?
yeah, and like he showed he could do it fairly well with that, and I'd certainly be intrigued to see what she was getting up to, assuming she'd survived.
That is a great question. I think she definitely would have survived because she didn't go through all that shit just to kill herself. But then you wonder if her powers grew. Like, she wasn't even a teenager. So, if we're following X-Men logic, everybody booms in their like powers when they're 13 or become of age. So you wonder. So my first question would be like, what? Like, did her powers escalate? Or that would be like, I think, one of the better indications as to what happened to Charlie McGee.
Yeah. No, fair. Okay. I wanted to ask you briefly about the adaptations. You mentioned the 84 one, and we had the Zac Efron remake. I know he didn't remake it, but he was Daddy McGee in that one in 2022. Like, are you fans of either, both, none of them? Like,
Yeah,
what do you
I
think?
mean, the 84 one was just I think, and it had like that coziness that I loved with the on Irv. And what is his wife's name? Norma?
I think so.
Yeah.
That sounds
But I think if I could like take one, so the 2022 remake, it was a very it left the book a little bit. If I could take one thing out of the 2022 and like stick it in the 84, is that the actor of John Rainbird was so good. He
Michael Grey Eyes.
Yes, he was phenomenal, and he brought like a real darkness to the character that was really more. I cannot recall the name of the original like 1984 John Rainbird actor,
No,
but
Michael Grey Eyes is actually an Indigenous American.
yes, he
well.
didn't brown face it. Yeah, it was the 80s. It was a different time. But I very much appreciated his, like, I don't know whether it was the script that was written that way or his take on it, but the original actor really, he was almost a jovial character, he was very, he wasn't dark. He was like another surrogate grandpa, which is what he was trying to be to Charlie, like for her to trust him. But I really liked Grey Eyes' interpretation, and I think it was the best part of that remake.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I did actually like probably about the first 40 minutes or so where we got to see a bit more of the Mickeys at home. I did enjoy that.
It had a lot more Vicky, didn't it? It was nice to see Vicky a little bit more. I mean, sorry, Heather Locklear, original Vicky, but I liked it, but I also didn't.
Okay.
I don't know what to say. I can't remember that much of her in the book. And I guess they were really trying to anchor Charlie to, a feminine, like the loss of a parent, which makes sense. But then you only had like another like 50 minutes of movie time.
Yeah. So last question on Firestarter then. Like, I want you to give me a 3-word summary, a 3-word review that you think could convince somebody who's never given Firestarter a go to go and pick it up and read it.
Try so hard. So I think my first one would be like cozy grandparents, hyphenated, so it's one word. I liked yours, Daddy McGee.
Yeah, we hyphenated that one as well.
That's a good one. And the last word, I guess, would be like dynamite.
Nice. Yeah, you need something explosive in there, don't you? Right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, great. Well, Rowan, thank you for that. That was a really fun chat about Firestarter, and we are almost done. The test that isn't a test is almost over. But before I let you go, there's one more thing we need to do, and it's not an optional thing. This is more just a warning of like this is happening, and we're doing it before we wrap this up. So we've got to go through the quick fire 19 question King challenge. So yeah, are you ready to give it a try?
I think so.
Okay, cool. So this is just the quick fire round that I'm ending all of these chats with. You don't need to give me any explanation at all. We can just bang, 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 rapid fire through them. I'm just curious to hear what your answers are. So let's just give it a try. So what was your first King book that you read?
Firestarter.
Okay. And what's the most recent King book that you've read?
It's a short story called The Jaunt.
An excellent one.
You did, yeah. You would.
Oh yeah.
And very science. It wasn't horror at all. It was definitely science fiction with just a like horrific ending.
I was going to say, saying it's not horror at all. I was like, well, yeah, until the last bit. But yeah, well, I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask anyway. What's your all-time favorite King?
Dr. Sleep.
Oh, okay. Curveball. Nice. And what about your all-time least favorite, if you have one?
Mummy Knockers.
Mm-hmm. Fair.
I don't know.
What do you think is King's most underrated book?
I think I pass. I don't think that there is any work of his that comes out and people like does not have someone who like when we say underrated is like, oh, somebody doesn't appreciate this. I don't think he can put out a book that or a short story that does not gain immediate like recognition and celebration. I don't think he has an underrated book. It's not to say that none of his work is like that all of his work is stellar. I just think he has such a wide handle on the market that somebody will love it.
I get that. Okay. So thinking in terms of cover artwork, which King book has your favorite cover artwork? Oh yeah. Yeah.
So simple.
Classic.
So simple. The original. I love it. It's like
doesn't appear in the story at all.
No.
Totally confusing. But yeah.
What is this guy? This guy is like got a beak with teeth. What is that?
Yeah. And then there's Luke Skywalker with him.
Yeah. I mean, this post-apocalyptic scene could definitely be like, the deserts of Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's like a sickle. Like, I think that's supposed to be death, like a medieval death. And I don't know, but yes, I like it. I love this. And most probably because of my connection to this book, which obviously is the first edition and my grandmother passed it down.
Okay. What about your least favorite King cover?
The original cover of Harry did not do the book justice.
No.
It was no good. It was not exciting. It was, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you on that. What's the one King book you could recommend to anyone?
Night Shift.
Okay.
Yeah.
Curious on this one, given your route into King, what's your favorite King adaptation?
Okay. So I would say, I mean, the Dr. Sleep was so cathartic for me personally. Like that ending was just like, oh yeah. However, I will say, did you ever watch the TV show Haven?
It's on my list. I've got season 1. I found it on DVD, and I know it's like chock full of Easter eggs, so I'm really looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, I again, did not realize that it was a Stephen King adaptation, like taken from The Colorado Kid. But I binged that entire series. It was so fun.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So
Okay.
I would give honorable mention to Dr. Sleep. I mean, I think that was every character in that was so good.
Yeah. What about your least favorite adaptation?
Tommy Knockers.
That's fair again. Which King character would you most like to have make a cameo in your own work?
Stephen King as a person.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Well, he is a character in one of his books.
He is a character. And you have to wonder, what is it like to like be known for an entire genre? Like, not just like, oh yeah, like Mary Shelley, created Frankenstein. No, Stephen King and the genre of horror. Like, what was life for Joe Hill when he was growing up? That is what I premised my book on.
Okay, cool. I'm even more intrigued now. Which King book or story would you say is perhaps most similar to your style of writing?
Okay, I would ask this of you because I would say I will freely admit that I have not read all of Stephen King's works. I'm constantly like, every time your feed posts, I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't read Revival yet or The Institute. There's like so many, like something's coming up. Like, there's always a book I haven't read of his. So I would ask this of you because you have both read my book and his book. And I actually have had a reviewer who I very much value said like, oh, this was like a Stephen King. And I'm like, oh, I mean, thank you, but also like the pressure. So I would ask this of you.
Oh, okay, tough. I mean, I already mentioned I got some Gerald's Game vibes for quite a lot of In the Arctic Sun, but then towards the end, funny you mentioned Revival actually, because Revival would be one. The way that book is a sort of 3/4 slow burn and then a final quarter of like, wow, what the hell is happening here? So maybe that one. I mean, I definitely would plump for sort of 90s onwards because I think, 90s King is my favorite decade of his, and I think that's where he had the confidence to just do what he wanted. He'd really nailed this sort of human, real life relationship building drama stuff, but can still pull out some really dark, weird stuff at the same time.
He had like Lizzie's story, and you're right, he did do a lot more human. Yeah. Okay. A Revival. I will have to read it now.
Yeah. Okay. And so for this one, I just want you to give me one King book for each of these categories. So I want one that you would keep forever, one that you would read only once and then never think about again, and one that you would delete from existence.
All right. Keep would be Salem's Lot.
Okay.
Read once. Revival. I'll read it. Who has time? Who has time to read stories once? And I think delete from existence would be Insomnia.
Okay.
All right. Okay. I hope that's right or wrong.
I think it depends how much of a Dark Tower head you are, but
yeah, no, Dark Tower.
Fair enough. And okay, we're into the final 5 of the 19 question challenge. This is just a quick either or. So again, no explanation needed. Just give me one or the other. So, the book or the movie? The Stand or It?
The Stand.
Would you rather take a holiday in Derry or spend a night at the Overlook?
The Overlook.
Short story or full novel?
Short story.
And lastly, would you rather go for walkies with Cujo or have a weekend away with Annie Wilkes?
I could change Cujo. I could change him.
He was a good boy. It wasn't his fault. Okay, great. There we go. That's done. We're all done. The 19 questions are done. The King chat is done. The test is over. You've passed with flying colours.
I'm feeling okay.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been a really fun chat. And before we go, I just want to put it over to you for you to do plugging of where people can find your stuff and where they can find you, all of those things.
I got stuff. It's on my website. Go to my website. It's like the repository. For 2023, I have some things coming out, and I can't say what yet. So
Fine.
I don't know. If you're really interested in my stuff, you'll find it.
Okay, good.
Is that too bravado?
Bit of mystery? No, I like it. And what is your website? Just, I know, I mean, I'll put it in the description, but you may as well say it.
It's writer rowanhill.com. I don't know. I look on my like stats every month or so, and it's like most people go to the about section. I'm like, oh, like I have to like write more interesting things about me, like become like the Carmen Sandiego kind of version of myself.
Yeah, cool. Well, there you go. There's some writing you can do in 2023 while you're waiting for other ideas to.
Write my biography. Oh, that's depressing.
Maybe we should end on that note. Rowan, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. That was a lot
Thank
of
you,
fun.
Dave. This is fun. This is not a test. This was very fun. Good luck with all the rest of them.
So there we go. Huge thanks to Rowan for her time and for all her wise words. Really, really enjoyed that conversation, as you could probably tell. And if you've got this far, thanks for sticking this far. Don't forget to check the description for all the links to Rowan and her work, and links to my things that you can pick up as well, like my quiz book and the newsletter you can sign up for. And of course, stick around with this podcast, because season 1 has one more episode left. And I'm going to tell you now, it's a good one. It's a writer who doesn't just like Stephen King, has actually worked with Stephen King. Heck, is even friends with Stephen King. So do stick around for that one final, for now at least, that one final constant writer coming to you very, very soon.